Knowledge plays a huge part. In fact, no, just the water, John, not the bottle itself. You'll get it right in a minute. In fact, an overseas competitor has never won the annual marathon here. This year, 8 American and Canadian teams came to battle it out with New Zealand's best. The start was in Queenstown. Hamish Clark was there.
Famous the world over for tourist jet boat rides, Queenstown played host to a very different kind of jet boating recently for the start of the 2001 Canterbury Foundation World Jet Boat Marathon. 60 of the best blasted their way out of Queenstown Bay in a mad dash to the outlet of Lake Wakatipu, the Kawerau River. Amongst them are half a dozen previous world champions from 3 countries. All eyes were on newcomer Mike Zola from Medford, Oregon, in American Thunder. In the States, rivers run deep. The shallow shingle beds of New Zealand would surely be a baptism of fire for Zola, who was counting his luck after the first leg.
I feel pretty lucky, pretty fortunate to be in front of the pack, actually. Yeah, it was pretty, it's definitely a lot different than what I'm used to running.
Commercial Kawerau jet operator and skipper of the racing team, Sean Kelly, tucked in behind the leaders, even if it was a little too close at times.
Yeah, it was very wet, and getting under the first bridge there, we got absolutely drenched with the rooster tail. Couldn't see a thing, but we picked up, coming up the shot over, we picked up about 3 boats on the way up there, so a bit of local knowledge was quite useful. But yeah, could be right up the top. She was quite gnarly coming through there. Couldn't see a lot.
3 times world champion Mark Cromie was happy with his new engine and boat combination. After 20 years, Cromie had dispensed with the popular twin turbo engine and opted for a much lighter 572 cubic inch naturally aspirated Chev-based Donovan. With 6 days of racing to go, this was not the time to prove how fast it could go, but he was pleased with the early result.
This is a very hard river to read. River, and the problem is the same colour sand is the same as the river, and we did run over a couple of major shingle bars, but we got through them okay. Very tight on the steering because it's got so much sand in the water, hard to steer the boat, but what we did is we just sat back and tried to get a clean run so as we got here without doing any damage.
One boat not matching the pace of the leaders was the aptly named Slowpoke, piloted by Daryl Sutherland.
We were coming up there following another boat, and we'd thought about passing it down there, but the rooster tail was a bit high, so we just sort of stuck in behind them, and just as we went a wee bit wide on that corner, and the boat just come out of nowhere on the inside of us, on my inside, and he shot through there, and rooster's tail just right in the face, killed the engine, and as you can see, parking's at a premium around here. That's where we ended up.
With nerves settled, there was little time wasted getting the downstream leg underway back to Lake Wakatipu. Fastest man on the shot over, Mike Zola, led off through the rocky gorge. competition was temporarily halted while Robert Thompson's TMR Racing floundered through the gorge without power. Eventually he was cleared from the track. As it turned out later, the suspected fuel blockage was nothing more than a fuel tap, accidentally knocked when his crew was mounting up. Jason Scott, driving the unlimited class entry Stealth, was also hampered with electrical problems.
Coil had come off just coming into the second gorge and cut us out. We luckily found the problem, had a backup circuit to get it going again. We had to do a wee bit of pushing and get to some water, but we got there again. Lost probably a couple of minutes, I'd say.
Anxious moments slipped by along with the competition as Scott came to terms with his chances of securing his first world title. The downstream leg saw the positions unchanged, the rest of the league boats covering the 20 kilometres in less than 9 minutes. First through to the lake was Mike Zola, proving his first racing experience in New Zealand was no fluke. Canadian Spencer King next to the line in a 1-2 for the tourists. In an unusual move by organisers, the first day had 4 legs, maximising the tourist region's diversity of rivers. The third and fourth legs took in the Dart River at the end of Lake Wakatipu. Launching at Glenorchy, teams raced across the lake to find the river entrance. Once again, Zola unfazed by the unfamiliar water conditions. The American was lucky not to be overtaken on the upstream leg when Canadian Spencer King applied pressure, taking a straighter line through the braided channels. Fellow Canadian Paddy Stratton had a bit of homegrown help for guidance, keeping him on the straight and narrow. Another past world champion, Neil Ross, the man who set up commercial jet boating on the Dart, suffered the frustration of pushing on his own river.
We had a wee bit of a hull handling problem on the way up, which new hull, new boat, and you've got to take it to the limit. I really enjoy the Dart. I was driving it hard. It's still a long way to go. Our intention was to enter and have a lot of fun and sort the boat out, and we're having a lot of fun, and we're certainly sorting the boat out.
US entry Mark Crawford in rush hour wasn't caught up in the traffic, but did need to be towed back into the race. No such problem for Canadian Sam Strain or Tim Harding in Team USA. With no access for road crews at the top of the Dart, drivers contemplated the trip downstream on water the same colour as sand. Reading water downstream is always more difficult than upstream, and the murky colour only added to the challenge. Despite whispers about his team's chances of making it up or down unscathed, it wasn't Zola or the more experienced King who came to grief. In fact, it was local tourist operator Sean Kelly in Aron Jet.
I was watching the 2 guys in front of me, and I was creeping in, and I was getting concentrating too much on them, and I wasn't watching where I was going. I took a shoot that was a 90 degree, and I just down that too hard and spun out.
4 years ago, Mark Freeman had the longest jet rooster tail in the game and copped a bit of flack for his waste water while overtaking. Turn the clocks forward, and almost every high-speed boat sports the long telltale water trail, leaving Freeman and many others in their wake. Next morning dawned overcast, but not enough to dull picturesque Lake Wanaka. On the banks of Glendu Motor Camp, the flotilla of race boats assembled in readiness for the assault on one of the most difficult rivers in the championship, the Matukituki. Well respected by even the most experienced jet boaters, the Matuki is revered by all who've raced her. The braided channels and sandy shingle banks are deceptively tricky in spots, especially after recent heavy rains had changed the river flow.
The only thing that's a little tough right now is the rivers are dirty, so they're really, they're really tough to read. And this one today, this morning, is going to be bad. If we can get up and down this one and stay clean, that's what we're trying to do till we get to some of the. We've got the Clutha this afternoon and the Waitaki tomorrow. Those are both pretty clean rivers, so we should be able to get back on it then.
Unfortunately for Krennic, he did little more than start, forced out when a brand new oil filter broke on the engine and he lost oil pressure. For the rest, the run to the river was out around Glendew Bay, across the chop and into the mouth of the Matukituki and the driving rain. Spencer King beat our race leader Mike Zola to the river mouth and wasn't caught again until the end of the leg. Zola settled into second spot and also made it safely to the top. Not so for many of the back markers who found themselves in part of the river quickly named the Graveyard. Even the experienced double world champion Ken McDonald, unaccustomed to racing at this end of the field, was caught out.
We're normally used to running at the field, front of the field. This time we're running at the back, and when you see boats going up channels all over the place, and you think, oh, that must be the right way, and up you go, and it's wrong, and yeah, it's different. It's a lot of fun. It's different.
Mounting concern over the shallow start area for the downstream leg brought everyone together for a second and then third driver briefing before it was agreed the start would be upstream of the original point. This would ensure all boats would get away from the top without the risk of running aground.
We will do what was suggested. We'll wave you away, flag you away from here in the start order. Boat on, cruise on down. Now the AWEC vehicle with the flag up is the start line.
King blasted off, confident of the race ahead, without the distraction of another boat in front to contend with. Zola, on the other hand, was determined not to let the Canadian get too far ahead. Languishing in the riverbed from the upstream leg, the Enterprise was easily negotiated by Spencer King, but Zola opted for an alternative route to the right. It looked boatable even for these quick craft, but Mike Zola's dance with Lady Luck had finally come to an end.
I was just trying to go around the corner and pump lost suction, settle us down right there, and that was it. Almost had it. I guess that's part of the game, though. Almost.
Hard-charging Rob Pooley, committed to the same track, managed to negotiate Maersk Seafoods past the stricken American. In a bid to avoid the congestion, Cromie took a track which from the air looked even more risky, but somehow managed to squeeze through and back into the main river flow. Canadian Paddy Stratton had a lucky escape, taking yet another track to avoid Zola, crashing his way across the shingle and eventually back into deep water. While D-Class Garth McMaster wasted little time moving Southern Stinger up a place. So the end of the sixth leg brought with it its first major change in leader. An American out, but replaced by a Canadian, with Mark Cromie another 3 minutes further back. Southland's Jason Scott was 10 minutes behind the race leader, with Kiwis Neville Kelly and Garth McMaster within seconds of each other, and separated by Canadian Sean Carter. Compatriot Paddy Stratton rounded out the top 8. The lineup for the drag down the Clutha for the 7th leg would finally show just who had the out-and-out speed. Spencer King got off to a flying start and was never caught in the 60-kilometre dash to Lake Dunstan. One man likely to catch him was Zola, on a mission to win back the lead. Unfortunately, the engine went off song near the end of the leg, and the American was forced to reduce speed. Later inspection would reveal a cracked piston, ending any chance of a win. More than 30 seconds back was the black boat of Rob Pooley. But the General was on the march. Mark Cromie completed the run in the second fastest time of 32 minutes and 22 seconds. Aron Jet BHP Transport A class was dominated by Neville Kelly in 888. It was no coincidence his hull was running in similar trim to race leader Spencer King. This was the hull King campaigned in the last Worlds held in New Zealand 4 years ago, and the older model Eagle hull was showing no signs of age when it came to top speed. Overnight crews worked frantically to replace the run bearings in Rob Crinnick's engine, but the damage was too severe and his race was run. Under the same roof, leader Spencer King with his engine out, trying to stop an oil leak.
Pretty worried about it, whether it was a pressure hose or just a leak, but it was just a leak on the sump, so didn't want it to leak and shouldn't have leaked, and it's been by fault because I put it together, so we just had a little problem there. But it was making a mess more than anything, but we're worried that it was a hose or something like that.
Inclement weather greeted the crews just below the main highway bridge on the Waitaki River near Oamaru. Always well prepared, Cromie shared the only real shelter from the drizzling rain, as the driver's briefing indicated no changes to the program. 66 kilometres upstream to Kurau, and river visibility was not favourable. Race leaders King and Pooley charged off with Cromie in pursuit. Even with the benefit of GPS navigation, the third-placed Holden racing team from Northland found themselves on the northern bank in a channel they'd wished they weren't.
Yeah, the bottom part was really misty, really rainy, and, you know, at 100 mile an hour in the rain, I really struggled to find the river, and, you know, it's a lot of communication between myself and my navigator, perhaps talking to myself sometimes to confirm that I am going the right way. And I know we took a couple of wrong channels, but they did get out back into the main current flow. We were in the trees too coming down, but we actually found a channel and got out, and, you know, it's a little bit of luck as well, but slow down when you get into the tricky stuff, get yourself out back into the mainstream, because when you run aground, you're a long time in the river.
Canadian Paddy Stratton, second in A-class, also found himself on the southern bank, but in much worse shape. The notorious Waitaki Willows claimed another victim.
Just made a bad decision. We went right where we should have went left and ended up in the Willows. We ended up getting some leaves in the pump and shut it off, tried to get the leaves off and floated down into some willows, and it lifted the bow up and sunk us right just like that. Bang, 3 feet of water.
Rob Pooley and Miles Levy were next to go. The familiar black boat stuck fast in the upper reaches of the Waitaki with a broken crankshaft, leaving everyone else to move up a notch. With Paddy Stratton sitting on the bottom of the river, A-class was wide open, and fellow Canadian Sean Carter moved up to take over second place in class, ironically using a borrowed engine. Rob Crinnick's spare, in fact, who about now was probably wishing he hadn't been so generous in the first place. Carter wasted little time getting to the Kurau Bridge. Crinnick's spare engine would see to that. It was raining cats and dogs on the way downstream. Throw in the odd bird or two for good measure, and the run was action-packed. Sean Carter had more than one attempt to get past the much smaller but very quick Meridian Energy D-Class entry of Garth McMaster. The impressive display from the lower-powered boat moved the class leader to a credible 4th outright at the halfway point of the marathon. Christchurch Casino C-Class is usually dominated by Mark Freeman, but a mishap on the Matuki-Tuki put pay to that, so the field was wide open, for the moment anyway. Racecourse Hotel's sponsored B-Class had a North Islander holding fort. Ross Bailey from Hastings fending off a challenge from the brothers Brett and Lester Singleton in Clearwater Resort. But the brothers' challenge came to a halt when the fire went out in the 350 Chev. They were forced to watch the rest of the day's racing from the sideline.
We were having a great run down, enjoying it, and the boat was going really well, and we just lost all power, so we don't know what the cause of the problem is at the moment. There's no sign of any, any obvious problems there. Fuel, everything's fine, electrics all look fine, so we're just going to have to do some work. Fortunately, we've got a day tomorrow, and get it back in ship shape and get going again.
After a lay day for repairs, the teams assembled at Spotswood in North Canterbury on the banks of the Waiau River. Renowned for its braided lower reaches and cliff-lined gorges, the Waiau always claims its fair share of marathon victims. Canadian Rob Crinnick, whose team worked overtime to get El Coyote back in the water, was determined to rid the Waiau River bogey.
Both the other marathons we broke down right here, and almost within about 100 meters of each time. So we don't really have to worry about it today. I think we're going to really blow by that spot upstream and downstream. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says I raced the Waiau both directions.
The murky water created by the rising Hanma River 100 k's upstream made the river flow difficult. Spencer King raced off as everyone had come to expect and didn't look back, leaving the rest of the field to fight out the minor placings. For Spencer, the trip was almost uneventful, save a small rock in the upper gorge, which knocked the current world champion slightly offline. John Shaw's Magic Formula 2 had been quietly working away down the field and moved up to 10th outright. Unfortunately, he didn't have the formula quite right, almost spinning out of contention. Not to be put off, Shaw regathered the boat and had the presence of mind to readjust the onboard camera and race on to keep his outright 10th spot. Ross Bailey had also begun pushing his B-class entry. There was still plenty of rivers for mistakes, so Bailey was taking it cautiously. The upstream braids caused few problems, although second-placed Mark Cromie came to a standstill at the Leslie Hills Bridge when the aluminium big block went off song. Up through the gorge, the last rapid to Hamner Springs was making the Canadians feel right at home. The mono hulls handling the churning water with ease. Some of the more experienced crews were caught going a bit too quick. experienced, it was to be even more exciting. Slowpoke going for yet another unexpected park-up.
We came round the corner there with quite a bit of speed on, and I sort of looked at it and thought, oh yeah, this doesn't look too bad, and didn't throttle off enough, and we got 2/3 through, and then she just bounced on a big one sort of right at the end there, and it killed the engine, and next thing we knew, we were sitting on top of a pile of rocks.
Seconds later, marathon rookie Barry Kennett found a prime spot.
I don't know why Larry pointed me in there, but I always go where he points, so what else can you say?
By the time Taranaki farmer Robert Thompson arrived, parking was at a premium. So he opted to drift backwards through the rapid in search of one. At the lunchtime turnaround, Chromie, concerned about his engine, was looking to conserve his position.
The only person that we have to worry about is Jason, right? So if we can just sort of hold, if I can just keep in front of him, lose another 2 minutes on him, we had 9 on him, we probably lost 2 coming up.
Jason Scott had a clean run up, but admitted things hadn't been going their way either.
Lack of oiling problem, I think, starting to take out the roller rockers. We are on our 3rd set for the week, and the new set we put on last night are heated up and not looking the best.
The final leg of the day was a shortened version of the upstream, back to Waiau Township to allow teams ample time to get back to Christchurch. For most, like Spencer King, it was sufficient, the Canadian putting in what looked like another flawless run to lead a procession home. For others, it wasn't quite so easy. American Tim Harding, dogged with bad luck from the beginning, nearly lost his boat before the start, the fast-flowing river threatening to swallow the back of the boat. 333 was successfully launched, only to be swamped further down the river to finally bring Harding's campaign to an end. Chromie's start downstream on 7 cylinders wasn't as planned. He clipped a rock and was thrown offline toward the cliffs. By the end of the short 40k stage, the bright red Holden hull was nowhere to be seen, nor the white hull of Jason Scott. Scott's downstream run was a nightmare. The engine oil pressure dropped so low, Jason finally elected to shut it down to save the internals, leaving Stealth to drift with the whim of the current. Meantime, just upstream, but a long way out of the river, Canadian Paddy Stratton had found a part of the river reserved for canoes. After his experience on the Waitaki, Stratton wasn't about to give up so easily, boating for what must have seemed like an eternity in a channel he couldn't be sure would end around the next bend. Back where Stratton first got into trouble was a graveyard of spent raceboats, scattered over half a kilometre. In amongst them, experienced and high-profile drivers, even a world champion.
We've hit rocks, we've run over shingle bars, we've destroyed our engine slightly, only on 1 cylinder, so we're coming down on 7 cylinders doing about 90 mile an hour. But the boat handled well. We hit a rock coming out of the gorge, nearly took the cliff out. Boat is looking a little sort of second-hand.
Commercial jet boat operators aim to find the most exciting ride they can for their passengers. This must have been a ride on the wild side.
I knew that we were in deep trouble when we started coming in here, but you can only keep trying, can't you? There's a bit of water there. One guy, Paddy Stratton, got through. He come barrelling in behind us, and I followed another guy in. And but there is one boat did get through, so it was good on him.
Taranaki's Robert Coburn got into the same track, and like Paddy Stratton, somehow found his way out and back into the main channel. Eventually, help arrived for the others. Trailers guided to the site using a makeshift flag, and smoke from a hastily built fire to mark where they were. Little did they know, Rob Crinnick was last seen buying a T-shirt to celebrate successfully finishing this leg. But for them, the Waiau bogey lived on. The leaderboard looked like a jumbled alphabet. Despite the large numbers of unlimited boats in the race, many of the lower class boats were holding top positions. McMaster in his turbo 3-litre D-class Southern Stinger, the best in second place, ahead of Kelly and Bailey. Cromie dropped to 5th after his afternoon in the wilderness, but would be back to continue the fight in the morning.
How do you feel? Oh, not another call.
Mark Cromie grew up in Rakaya, so the local river was his backyard. But on the penultimate day of the Canterbury Foundation World Jet Boat Marathon, his boat wasn't in the water.
What happened is we had a cracked piston. We knew we had something wrong, and when I looked at the motor, we pulled the head off it. We not only had one cracked piston with a hole through into the sump, but we had 3 others on the same side that were cracked, all exactly the same place. So we had one spare piston, but I didn't have a set, and I knew looking at the other side they'd be cracked as well. So that really put paid to it. I wasn't prepared to risk my $60,000 Donovan, you know, because once you crack a piston, the next thing it does is let's go at the rod and then starts throwing rods out the side.
Moving up through the ranks was another local, Stuart Cridge from Southbridge, who won the Unlimited category 4 years ago. Although Cridge's older twin turboed machine had left him trailing many of the newer, faster race boats, attrition had taken its toll on the Unlimited field, and Cridge was second in class behind Spencer King. Another old boat, probably the oldest in the field, was Redwood Hotel, still bearing the same livery it did in the 1993 Worlds. Phil Keselowski was taking one leg at a time. Spencer King did what he did best, led from the front and didn't look back. All that could be seen was his giant rooster tail. Even those travelling on the main road bridge at Rakaya couldn't escape the Canadian. Neville Kelly was less than 60 seconds behind the outright second-place getter Garth McMaster, but wasn't confident of picking him up on the run from the river mouth at Rakaya Huts to the Gorge Bridge.
The boat never really performs on the Rakaya going upstream. For our hull, we need some air under it to get it up, sitting up, but I think we'll struggle to catch Garth on the way up, but we normally wheel him in on the way on downstream legs. So just keeping in our sights will be good enough for us.
Ken McDonald had worked his way up through the field in Scenic Circle hotels and was up into 8th. Consistent driving had made up for the mechanical problems of the first few days, and he was at home on the Canterbury River, out driving many of his opponents. The gambler, Damien Pulley from Winton, might have been overtaken, but the almost rookie was preserving his top 5 position. This time last year, Pulley had entered his first marathon in a smaller hull and had gotten the bug, back this time with a more competitive rig. John Shaw's Magic Formula 2 took another spin, this time though for good, as the motor expired and their race boat drifted helplessly back amongst the oncoming traffic. Mark Freeman's marathon suffered a setback on day 2, and he'd been playing catch-up ever since. The very quick C-class entry was covering ground though, nailing back others in the class. He and crewman John Nuttall looking for every possible way to move up in the overall standings. One man with no chance in the overall standings was Rob Crinnick, but his repaired engine had him back in the hunt. Starting from the back of the pack almost every leg, Crinnick spent so much time passing other boats, his crewmen resorted to finding an alternative to the overtaking signal.
My navigator actually fashioned this up because his arm was getting tired from holding it up all the time, so he put a glove on the end of a paddle and duct taped it in here.
The Enterprise, an experimental rig, had been subject to its fair share of laughs. Never before had such a large craft boated these rivers, let alone race. For designer Steve Price, though, the marathon was not about winning.
It is a prototype. We're using the belts for commercial purposes, and this is a prototype to prove the belts under severe conditions, so that if we attempt to, when we sell them to commercial operators or other people that want to run twin units, where the units are in the centre of the boat, then we have some feedback and some information on the stress and strain. So we've got a similar system in a family boat with one engine, and this is the prototype for the big commercial boats to prove to them how well it goes.
So long as he kept the huge structure from getting stuck in the shallows, everyone, especially the rescue crew, was happy. Neville Kelly continued his charge downstream in true grit, chasing Garth McMaster, but he never caught the Southlander despite McMaster spinning up and losing time. Kelly's charge was halted with the engine when the camshaft snapped and his marathon was run. The shallow tracks and pools that have made the Rakaia famous for more than just fishing gave many of the smaller boats the chance to cut corners, sneaking down channels with less water. But there's always someone in a boat too big for the channel. After an hour of manhandling Queenstown Marine across the Stones, Shane Johnson and his band of not-so-merry men welcomed the offer of a helicopter to take the weight while they pushed the quick craft back to deep water. The final day of the Canterbury Foundation World Jet Boat Marathon would determine the new world champion. For Spencer King, it would be his 5th world title, but then no overseas driver has ever won a marathon on New Zealand rivers. For Garth McMaster and the D-Class Southern Stinger, it was a nervous wait. Even second place would provide him with the prestigious NZ1 title, the number awarded to the highest placed Kiwi. McMaster represented the hopes and aspirations of every class below the big boys.
Just stay in the water, and we're just going to... We got 10 minutes on Ross Bailey, so yeah, I think we just comfortably go up there and just stick in the main channel and yeah, get there and get home.
But some things were not meant to be, and when the flag dropped, it wasn't McMaster who followed King up the river. It was Ross Bailey from Hastings in Cornwall Steak and Ale House. Always a strong contender, Bailey's B-Class entry had been nipping at the heels all marathon, and suddenly he found himself second on the leaderboard. Canadian Paddy Stratton was still grappling with the shallow rivers. His boat, Hakuna Matata, had special meaning.
The name comes from the Lion King movie. It's a Swahili name. It means no problems, worry-free. We've had our share of problems, but we're still worry-free anyway. I thought it was a suiting name.
Stratton had had his fair share of worries in the last few days, but he powered on relentlessly under the watchful eye of his family and supporters. The surprise package was Sam Strain and the Merc Cruiser powered jet from D-Class. Lil Coyote, not much more than a family pleasure boat, was in the top 10 overall, and the Canadians were enjoying themselves. While they took to the smaller channels, big brother El Coyote, with Rob Crinnick at the helm, continued to wheel in the back markers. Sean Kelly's Carrail jet dropped to 7 cylinders and a couple of places when the big Chev broke a rocker stud. His crewman quick to respond to the call from the rattling V8. The only rattling going on for Mark Freeman was the stones under the Eagle hull as he powered the C-Class entry up the leaderboard. Although out of overall contention, such was the dominance of Freeman over his competition that he would go on to win his class. Damien Pulley's hopes of a podium finish looked like coming unstuck when the decision was made to lift the engine for repairs at the turnaround at lunch.
Just come halfway up. Oh, about halfway up we found a funny vibration, and we've just found out at the top it's a unit bearing, so hopefully we can get the engine lifted up and get it swapped over before the turnaround time.
Garth McMaster's problem at the start had been an alternator failure. In an effort to stay in contention for an overall placing, McMaster got going long enough to qualify by boating the first 2 kilometres, then retrieved the boat from the river and raced by road to the gorge for the start of the downstream, the failure costing him any chance of a top 3 finish. With pressure off from the competition, race leader Spencer King might have backed off for the final leg home, but he still drove like a man possessed. You could have been forgiven for thinking that the Canadian had driven the braided Waimakariri River all his life. Bailey, on the other hand, now in second place, was like a cat on a hot tin roof. All he had to do was finish to take out the NZ1 title. But was it all getting too much for the larrikin from Hastings? Damien Pulley also had a couple of close calls. The Kiwis likely to finish 2-3 were both having their moments. At the end of the day, the script could have been written on day 2. The Canadian raced away to take his 5th world title with a lead of an hour over his nearest rival.
The monkey has not kissed me yet. I feel like I'm Spencer King and I've come here to race and I was the man that won. And how we did it, I don't know. You know, it's just kind of the luck of the draw. You got to have luck and you got good gear, you got to have a good crew.
For the record, the leaderboard looked like this. Ross Bailey will carry NZ1 for the next 12 months as the highest placed Kiwi. Damien Pulley picked up 3rd outright in only his 2nd marathon, ahead of one of the sport's stalwarts, Stuart Cridge. Garth McMaster was unlucky not to be on the podium and settled for a very credible 5th outright, ahead of previous world champion Ken McDonald. Mark Freeman and Brendan Cameron round out the fastest 8 jet boaters for 2001. Spencer King was already in the record books as the only man to win back-to-back world crowns. In 2001, the 29-year-old from Hay River in Northwestern Territory had rewritten the record books. Never before had an overseas competitor won on New Zealand rivers, and never before had one driver won all 4 of jet boat racing's most coveted crowns in all participating countries: USA, Canada, Mexico, and now New Zealand. Not only that, King did it consecutively, a feat unlikely to ever be repeated.
Spencer, you know, is now a 5-time world champion, and I mean, those guys have certainly done a lot of boating. He's done a lot of world marathons, and he's a very good boater, you know, and that's what it's about, not having any problems, be reliable every day, start and finish every event without a problem.
For the Kiwis, an end of an era of dominance in jet boat marathon racing, summed up best by another Canadian, Rob Krennick, who's tried to win this title on numerous occasions in a country he describes as the holy grail of jet boat racing.
You know, really he is right now the Michael Jordan of our sport.
Yes, there's no higher accolade than that.
Look, I'm trying to understand what you're going through, Peter.
You haven't got a clue.
There you go, love.
Oh, thanks, Betsy. And one for yourself.
Oh, ta.
And I'm dead chuffed for the both of you. Cheers.
I'll second that. Thank you, Betty.
Yeah, cheers.
You're going to be missed, you know. But I hope you're both going to be very, very happy.
It won't be the same round here without you.
Oh, shut up, Curly. I haven't got my waterproof mascara on.
Don't worry, I'll make sure she's well looked after.
Well, you better add. She's a very special lady.
Oh, I know that, Curly, and I'm a very lucky bloke.
Right.
There you are.
Thanks, love.
He'd best stay away if he knows what's good for him.
Yeah, well, I'd happily flatten him right now.
Don't give him the satisfaction. Let the police do their job. He'll get what's coming to him.
The same applies as I told you the other day. Take some time off.
What am I supposed to do for money?
Well, all right,
Yeah, all right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can get back to your drinks now.
Hey?
I'll give you a week's wages. I'm sure things will die down in a few days' time.
And that's it. Hey? Well, thanks for your support, Dougie.
Well, try and see it from my position. I can't afford to upset punters.
Oh, no, we wouldn't want to do that, would we? I mean, it's not as if anybody's being made scapegoat here, is it?
Just keep your voice down.
What gives anyone in this room the right